This is In Character. I'm your host, Gerard Robinson, Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation. Hello, everyone. This is Gerard Robinson. Welcome back to a one-on-one conversation. I have this with people after I've had a group conversation, and today I'm with Christopher Todd, who was part of a larger group that I met with recently. Christopher, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Gerard.
So you're in Connecticut, and you talked about your experience on a number of points. One thing I'd like you to do a deeper dive on is your two-year experience as related to teacher leadership and what influence that had on the trajectory of your career.
Yeah, no, I'm happy as I kind of dive into that. I think one of the things that, as I look back and kind of resonate on that was really interesting was, the Connecticut Teacher of the Year process, I think, does a really nice job, and with the CSDE in partnership with the Connecticut Teacher of the Year Council to really work with districts and help districts kind of identify, somebody that's representative and reflective of the profession in Connecticut as a whole. I was humbled and honored by my colleagues to become, the Teacher of the Year in Windsor Public Schools. And one of the things that the council had done is that they worked to get all semifinalists, finalists for the state process to come together and provide kind of as an advocacy group and have meetings with the Department of Education. And, at the time it was Commissioner Pryor and a number of the leadership. So as a finalist for the state Teacher of the Year process that year, I had been invited to provide some feedback to the evaluation system. And we had just piloted it in Connecticut. There had been 7 districts that were part of the pilot, and Windsor happened to be one of those districts. So what was kind of interesting was that there was a lot of emotion at the table. You had educators from all across the state. You had state personnel, really talking about what was working, what wasn't working. And I just happened to be one of the few people at the table that had kind of lived it already for a year and was really willing to say, look, this worked really well. This wasn't working well. Here's some concerns that my colleagues have. I had started my career in alternative education. So I think that's something that I always bring to the conversation when you look at rubrics, when you look at, rubrics around educators that are really focused on what the students are doing. Sometimes, it raises questions. Well, is the rubric equitable across all educators, regardless of kind of what their class structure looks like and where they're working? So I just voiced, I took advantage. Everybody talks about having a seat at the table, and I had the seat and took advantage and spoke out for my colleagues. And really what that did was it just opened an incredible opportunity for me. Commissioner Pryor offered for me to come to the department as a teacher in residence in a hybrid role, and it was fantastic. So I taught one day in my district, and then I spent the next day, we're on the AB block rotation. I spent the next day in Hartford working in the talent office under Dr. Sarah Barzi at the time, who was the chief talent officer. And what was amazing was, my colleague and I, who were both teachers in residence, the department brought us into a number of conversations. So whether it be evaluation, whether it be evidence guide rubrics, whether it be, actual like tangible things that were happening in the classroom that we could provide feedback on. And then Dr. Barzi really gave my colleague and I the opportunity to just kind of jump in. Like, what did we think that was missing? What was something that we really were passionate about? And teacher leadership really became the focus of my 2 years as a teacher leader in residence at the State Department of Ed. So looking at, one, how do state agencies support teacher leaders, and how do we tap into kind of teacher leadership across the state of Connecticut? And then really our big focus was, how do we then take that back to districts? So how do we make it tangible so that districts can support teacher leaderships at the local level in a really meaningful way? And it turned out to be just an incredible opportunity. We did some really great things. We brought a number of really high quality professional development opportunities to Connecticut through partnerships with NSTOY, National Network for State Teachers of the Year. We were able to kind of build that out. Because of a lot of our work, we actually saw a teacher leader academy started between one of our associations and one of our state universities. And so they have a cohort that's actually coordinated by a former commissioner of education. And so that runs every year. We saw a number of districts really jump on it and create district teacher leadership academies that had elements of professional development brought in, but then also kind of broadening that scope for teacher leaders within the district. And I think one of the things that resonated with my colleague, Chris Poulos, and I all the time was that, you look at all the research around teacher leadership and you talk about the definitions, and in reality, it's educators have been teacher leaders for the entirety, that the profession has existed. It's not like teacher leadership is this new concept or this new idea. But I think it becomes such an essential piece in terms of how do we retain educators? How do we excite educators? How do we tap into kind of the expertise that each educator brings? And what I love about teacher leadership is it really allows us to say, I'm good as a teacher leadership in this domain and in this realm. Like this year, I am a teacher leader when it comes to student data and advocating for my colleagues and being able to use student data to kind of improve instructional practices. But maybe the next year, I'm a teacher leader for advocacy for the profession, right? And so I'm stepping into a kind of a different role, or I'm doing more of a curriculum-based role. And that was, I think, what Chris and I loved about teacher leadership was that it didn't matter what your role was. It didn't matter what your kind of expertise area was. It gave every educator kind of this opportunity to say, I'm really strong here. So let me help my colleagues, let me help students, and let me help my district to kind of support the implementation of this. And I think it allows for that conversation to happen to say that, I think a lot of educators were all type A, and I don't think we want to acknowledge that there's areas that we need work on, but teacher leadership really allows for that to happen. It allows us to say, look, I'm really good at this, but my colleague over here is amazing with the incorporation of technology in the classroom, or this colleague is amazing at like engaging students, at a level that you won't see in a lot of other classrooms. So, I think having the opportunity to bring those conversations to the state level to look at policies that the state could implement. We were able to really kind of broaden some of the certification codes in Connecticut so that we had now building leaders where it was, content or grade appropriate. We really looked at like, what does it mean to be a content area coach, and how could you kind of broaden that classification, and really how do we support educators that are stepping out of the classroom, either part-time or full-time, to support their colleagues, with the end goal of helping students. So it was a really kind of unique experience for me. Some days it was waking up in the morning and am I in Hartford today? Am I in my district? Kind of what am I doing? I remember I had just an unbelievable opportunity, to be on the stage at a plenary session with Secretary of Education Arne Duncan, and I'm getting text messages from colleagues and students who were live streaming it from the cafeteria, as they're watching it online. And you're just, you come back and you're in your classroom the next day, and students are asking you questions. Well, what's the Secretary of Education like? What did you guys talk about behind the curtain? What were some of the topics? So it was a really great opportunity. And I think one of the things that I was really cognizant of was what was the give back to my district, and I think as educators, oftentimes, it's kind of a reciprocal and mutually beneficial relationship, right? Like I want my district to support my growth as a professional. I want them to release me to be able to go experience different professional development offerings, to kind of engage. But at the same time, I was always thinking, but what's what's the give back to my district? So how am I bringing my new learning either back to my colleagues or back to the district as a whole? And I think that was something that, my work at the State Department, I was really able to do, and find ways to bring it back into Windsor Public Schools.
Sounds like you're doing some wonderful work, and the experience was rich. As we close, you're in Connecticut. Many of us may not have had a chance to visit your state. Tell us three things that are pretty interesting about the Department of Education.
So I think, Connecticut has a long-standing history of, really strong, highly effective educators. I think the Department of Education does a really good job to support that. I think we really look for ways to support the creativity and ingenuity of our districts. Connecticut, like many states, is locally controlled. So sometimes it's an interesting space to work in as an SEA. We're giving out guidance and recommendations, but at the end of the day, the local boards of education have a lot of control and a lot of power to implement. And so I think one of the things that Connecticut does a really good job of is advocating for changes in dialogue and focus areas. And, as an SEA, I think we can really drive the conversations that are happening at the local level, and do so in a way that we're not mandating change, but we're raising kind of the level of awareness so that change does happen because it's necessary. And again, it's like what's good for communities, what's good for our students, and how do we do that? That's, I think, and it's we are forever a partner to districts and to other organizations, and the mantra, it takes a village. I think that's kind of how we operate.
Thank you. Well, Christopher, thank you so much again for sharing what you do with our audience at In Character, and keep up the good work. And we look forward to more conversations.
Thank you, Jared.